All right, wonderful. Thank you. Hello, everyone, and good afternoon. Welcome to our first session of 2021. We have kind of changed this up a little bit. So this year we are calling these series Overcoming the Storm, special bi-monthly training and series for American Indian and Alaska Native school communities in the COVID-19 pandemic. I am Teresa Brinton. I am a member of the Coharie tribe and a descendant of the Lumbee tribe of North Carolina. I am a program manager, the K-12 program manager for the Alaskan Native and American Indian National MHTTC Center. We are located with the University of Iowa Native Center for Behavioral Health. I live here in Iowa on the Meskwaki settlement with my husband and grandchild. I have a master's in business administration, a master's in educational leadership. I've been involved with mental health and education my entire realm, for being a school principal and a school counselor at a tribal controlled school. Today we are very excited to have Dr. Connie Locklear. She is a full Lumbee enrolled. She's an expert in the field of education. She is currently the director of the Title VI Indian Education Program at Public Schools of Robeson County. She is the first vice president for the National Indian Education Board of Directors. Dr. Locklear also holds a bachelor and a master's degree in mathematics education, as well as an educational specialist and doctor of educational degree in curriculum and instruction. Today's session is called COVID-19 and its impact on Native students. We'll be saving the conversations. These are just some house cleaning rules we have to go through. We'll be saving the conversations from the chat, so please be mindful of that when you're writing. We are also recording today's event. Have we started the recorder, Ella? Okay, great. We are going to be recording today's events because we get an overwhelming request for these even after the event's over with. And we also put them on our website and on our YouTube page. So just kind of be mindful of that. Also, just make sure that we are respectful to each other and that know that we all have different experiences and beliefs. We want this to be an open and honest discussion. Please make sure that if you have any questions, concerns, please make sure that you bring them up. As we go through the PowerPoint presentation, if you have any questions, you can write it in the chat, and myself and Ella, my coworker, will interrupt Dr. Connie and ask her the question. Also, we now have an hour and a half for these because all last year we were running out of time. So we figured we would start doing an hour and a half, so we should have plenty of time for questions and answers. Just so you know, this year we have scaled back on our listening sessions and learning seminars because I have a lot more to do than just this, even though I love doing it. So we've scaled it to bi-monthly. Today is our first one for this year. Our next session is going to be January 29th. So we're going to be having them twice a month, 2 to 3:30 p.m. Central Time. The first sessions will be on Thursdays. The next session will be on a Friday. Is that correct, Ella? Okay. Yeah. Okay. Just want to make sure. Are there any advisory council members on today? And Ella, if you can help me identify, because I can't see everybody. Do we see, is there anybody there? If they are, they could also speak up, introduce yourself. I do want to mention that Connie Locklear is also one of our advisors and consultants as well. Okay. Great. So for today, they'd like us to start it off with a blessing, a poem, a song, a quote, or any words of wisdom. So I always like to bring that to the audience. I hope that somebody speaks up and gives us something. It could be anything, just words of wisdom, a nice poem that you like, a drum, song, blessing, whatever you like. So I'm going to give you guys a few minutes, and I'm hoping that someone will come forward and do that. I'm going to have to start paying people to do this part. Give $100 initiatives. Anybody have a special quote that they'd like to share? Okay, I also need to make sure that everybody understands the content of this webinar is not the creation of SAMHSA, and any opinions expressed is also not part of SAMHSA and AHS, the American Alaskan MHTTC. I do want to ask, and Ella, you can go ahead and take off this piece too if you want to. How are you guys feeling in 2021? And you can put your comments in the chat. How is everybody feeling in the new year? And while you're doing that, I could tell you how I'm feeling. I'm feeling relief. Last year was trying for myself, as many others, I'm sure. My family members, my friends have all been affected in one way or the other, either having COVID, having a loved one pass from COVID, losing their jobs. It's just been a very trying year for us all. I could tell you that I have learned that family is the most important thing in this world, way beyond money and materialistic things. As you all know, if you knew me last year and we're on one of these listening sessions last year, I had to spend 3 months back in North Carolina caring for my mother because she has cancer. So I could tell you that it has taught me a lot. Money means nothing to me. I'm a very simple person, but family is just something we need for ourselves. So, but I'm hoping for better things to come this year, absolutely, for us all. And I can't see the chat, Ella. Can you see the chat?
Yeah.
Can you say some of the comments that are written in the chat?
Yeah, so we got some great comments. Randy Taylor actually posted a quote, "No one knows you've had enough until you say enough." A lot of people saying they are optimistic in the new year, feeling better, hopeful, optimistic. 2021 kind of feels like 2020 part 2, but still feeling hopeful. A new start for a year that was really bad last year. Pessimistic. I'm feeling a bit anxious. This new year has not started out great, but I'm hopeful for a better year and grateful.
Good. Yeah, it can't get much worse than it did last year. I don't think anyway, guys. I surely hope not. So I'm definitely optimistic for a better year. And Crystal, keep your head up. Just keep your head up. So, okay. So with that, we are ready to hand this over to Dr. Locklear, and she's going to introduce herself and begin the presentation.
Hello, everyone. I hope you're having a great day today. Can we go ahead and put the PowerPoint up, Ella? Thank you. I am excited about being here today. And I put better in the chat because I have been battling COVID for the past 3 weeks. So I was not sure if I was going to be able to make it this week, but I am feeling much better. It's amazing what happens when you get up and you take a nice shower and blow dry your hair and fix up and put on clothes, because sometimes our routine changes or our thought process changes when we dress up a little bit. So I'm excited about being here today. Today's topic is COVID-19 and its impact on Native students. Go to the next slide, please. I want to begin by acknowledging the land of our indigenous populations that gather here with us today on this virtual platform. There's so many of us here today. And I always like to pay respect to our elders from the past, the present, and the future. And may we always be mindful of the path that our elders have paved for each of us. I know I wouldn't be where I am today had not been for our elders. And may we never forget our connection to the land.
So true.
Next slide, please. There are 4 goals that we have for this session. Number 1, we want to highlight the lack of equity in our educational systems. We also want to discuss the social emotional challenges for our Native students, and we all know that they exist. We want to emphasize the importance of culturally relevant strategies and discuss ways to help Native students and parents during this pandemic. This has been difficult for every one of us, everybody. So we want to try to discuss some strategies that we have used and how they have helped our students and parents. Next slide. Who am I? I'm a wife, a mother, a grandmother, a daughter, a sister, auntie, and a friend. I am a proud member of the Lumbee Tribe of North Carolina. I started my education career in 1994, and I have been in education since the beginning. I started out in business, and I have a degree in a minor in accounting. And I worked for a company for a while, and that's what I thought I was going to do, but I just fell in love with teaching. And I have been in education since 1994. I started out teaching at a little school in our community, Fairgrove Middle. And Teresa, you're very familiar with that school. I started teaching there. I taught 7th grade and 8th grade, and during that time, I taught students that were very strong in math. So I taught 7th grade pre-algebra and 8th grade algebra 1. And most algebra 1 was usually a 9th grade course, but these students were excelling. So I had the opportunity to teach them. And then I moved to the high school in 97. And I've been an adjunct professor at the University of North Carolina at Pembroke in the math department. I've also served as a curriculum supervisor in our district for about 6 or 7 years, and I worked with the math and science teachers in our district and provided professional development and training for all of our teachers. And I have been a director of Indian education since 2014 for the public schools of Robeson County. We have one of the largest Title VI grants in the nation. Our grant is over $2 million annually. And we have about 10,500 students that are enrolled in our program. I also worked with the North Carolina Teacher Academy, which was a consortium where we trained teachers across the state of North Carolina, provided various professional development. And I was the only Native teacher, the only Native fellow is what we were called at that time, that took part in this. I was the only person that was a Native American that worked with this consortium. I'm the former chairperson of North Carolina State Advisory Council on Indian Education. I serve on the Professional Education Preparation and Standards Commission, and we actually had a meeting this morning. I was appointed by the General Assembly as it relates to licensure and teaching with teachers and helping them get their license and submitting information to the state board. I'm the chairperson for the borough's Welcome STEM Student STEM Enrichment Program. You already heard I'm first vice president of the National Indian Education Board of Directors and Dissertation Committee member. I never thought I would enjoy reading research, but I really like research. Okay, next slide. Now, all of that you heard about me was stuff. This is really who I am. This is really who I am. I am the wife of this gentleman here. You see my hand on his little belly. And I am the daughter. I am the mother of the young lady beside him, and my son is beside me. And this is my son-in-law and my daughter-in-law and our 3 grandchildren. All of that stuff that I said to you earlier was great opportunities I've had in my life, but that is just stuff. This is what really defines me and who I am. These 2 people over here to the right of my screen, my mom and my dad, and I want to talk a little bit about them because this is all going to tie into what we're going to talk about today. Neither of my parents graduated from high school. I am the first high school graduate in my family. I'm the oldest of 5 children. My mom got pregnant with me when she was in the 9th grade, and she dropped out of school. The gentleman you see beside her is not my biological father, but he's my dad. He's the man that raised me. And he had polio as a child. So he taught himself how to walk again. He could not walk for years, stayed in the hospital for many, many years. But he always said, I'm never going to go on. He never wanted to receive a handout. Those were his words. I'm not going to receive a handout. I'm going to work. I'm going to one day work. And he did. and he was a sharecropper. If you don't understand, many of you may know what a sharecropper was. That's where you use somebody else's land and you farm their land, and they get so much part of what you make. And so we were very, very poor growing up. But these two people taught me some of the greatest lessons in life. They taught me, number one, that your word is your bond. Number two, whatever you do it with integrity and fidelity. My dad used to say when I was growing up, if you dig a ditch, sweetheart, make sure that you dig it straight and somebody will notice. So his emphasis was on doing the best job that you could do. So these two, this is what really defines me. All of that other stuff is stuff. But I really wanted to highlight this because I think sometimes we forget our ancestors and we forget the things that we've been taught as young people. Next slide, please. Now, this moves into our some of our topic today. Equality versus equity. I love this cartoon, this slide. When we look at the left side, everybody's given the same step stool. But if you notice, this last person here in the little short guy in the purple shirt still can't see. So just because we're giving everybody the exact same amount, we're saying we're being fair, we're going to give everybody the same amount, it's still not equity. When we look over here, now this is equitable. The first gentleman in the blue shirt did not need a step stool. He can already see. The second one did, but he only needed one. The third one needed two. And you see those hands raised. When you see those hands raised, what it says is I'm liberated. I now can see. And what happens a lot of times, we want to give everybody the exact same amount, and we're not making it equitable across the board. And they're still missing out. I'm going to throw this out here since some of us we've been hearing all this about this $600 stimulus check. If I'm a millionaire, what is $600 to me? But imagine what $600 is to a parent that has 5 children and making $40,000 a year. There's a big difference there. So we need to provide opportunities that are equitable across the board. This is just, I always use this a lot when I'm talking to teachers and when I'm talking to individuals about, are we making sure that what we're giving to our students, is it equitable or is it just fair? There's a huge difference. Next slide. One thing we can certainly say for sure is that this pandemic has highlighted a lack of equity in our American Indian students, in our American Indian communities, in our Indigenous communities. Many Americans reside in rural communities where there's a lack of broadband and other resources, such as water, medical supplies, healthy foods, etc. And these communities are high poverty communities. Our community, we have like 33 to 35% poverty in this community. That's huge. And in some pockets, areas, it's even larger. The district is so large that you can go to one end of the district and you may see these nice homes. You drive a few miles down the road and you see something totally different. And it's just amazing. According to the First Nations Development Institute, 54% of American Indian Alaska Native people, or the populations, live in rural, and 68% live on or near their home tribal homelands. I want to talk to you about equity and how it has impacted our community here. I have resources, and I am truly blessed that purchasing internet would not be a problem for me. But 2 weeks before the pandemic hit, I got a call from my wireless phone company that said, we have a wireless, fixed wireless network that we're offering now in your community. Would you like it? And I'm like, oh yes, absolutely. My husband is he's taking classes, he's in college, and I was teaching online. And then a lot of my work sometimes I have to do after hours. And I was paying, I said over 100, I'm just going to tell you, it was probably close to $150 for internet service. And before the month was out, I was out of internet service. I was not streaming. Did not have Netflix. I did not have Disney Plus. I could not, we don't game, but gaming would have been out automatically anyway. was just doing homework, downloading assignments for him, and me checking work for our students. And there were some days I would just go to the office on Saturday to utilize the internet service because I didn't have enough. Now, that is a lot when we talk about equity and we're talking about digital equity. And then we're in the middle of this pandemic where you're saying to everyone, we're going to start this remote learning process. Next slide, please. So in March of 2020, we received this order, and it's across the nation, that every schools are going to be shut down. It happened 1st March 2020. And then we're talking about Chromebooks. So what are we going to do? We're going to buy every child a Chromebook. We're going to make sure that every child has, some students were given some Chromebooks and some were not because we didn't have enough devices to pass out. I checked with our district based on the CARES Act. They received this funding and they told me to wait before I purchase funds out of our grant for our students that had an ED 506 form. And some of you with Title VI programs, you're familiar with that. And that is a verification form for students to be enrolled in our program. And I waited for them with the CARES Act. Finally, when they got their funding in place, I purchased these Chromebooks in September. I was told that they would be ready in November. I called in November. The gentleman told me they were not ready and they would probably be ready by January or December. So he said, call back before you leave to go home for the holidays, which we did. Now he's telling me February. And then he just told me recently it may be longer than that. So how are we going to provide an equitable opportunity when we can't even get devices put in students' hands? And then what makes that worse is in our area, we don't even have connectivity or broadband. Rural communities lack access to broadband. We have families that do not even have internet access. And even if they did, I mean, we give them hotspots. What good is that when you don't even have a tower in the community to access to broadband? During the pandemic, we were at the beginning of the pandemic. We're still in the pandemic. In the beginning and when we all were sent home, I was working on my grant and I had some information I needed office. So I went to the office, and when I got there, all these cars were sitting in my parking lot. And these were cars of parents and children sitting in the parking lot to access the internet service from the school's internet service. Not only parents, I'm talking about educators. These were educators that were sitting there in their cars trying to access the internet service so they could continue working. This has been, I mean, this is just, when we're talking about equity, this pandemic has really highlighted the lack of equity for everybody across the nation, especially in our American Indian communities. We put buses in church parking lots, and we had those buses in businesses so that parents could feed off that internet service from those buses. And we've had hotspots. Our district sent down 5,000 hotspots. We have about 22,000 students in our district. And we received, based on the information that parents gave us, we had over 5,000 hotspots that were to us from the state. At first, we couldn't even give those hotspots out. Parents were not coming to pick them up, and then when they did come to get them, they weren't working. What good is a hotspot when you don't have broadband? So we are really highlighting the lack of equity that exists here. This has been very difficult, not only for us, but I'm sure it's been very difficult for you as well in your communities. Next slide. Do we have any questions or comments before I move on?
Yeah, I just want to ditto everything you said, Connie. I have dealt with this a lot. We have had a lot of conversations about this. It's just sad because this is what the reality is in Native communities. I have seen where, and I think this is what Cheryl was alluding to, where the buses were actually bringing them paperwork because they don't have even the infrastructure for the hotspots. And it's sad. It's sad to know that this is the year 2021 And, we don't have internet service for every household in America. And truly, it's disgusting. And if there's anything we've learned from this pandemic, it's that education is important. And we need to do something about this. This is a huge need. And not only is all of this stuff happening, but what's happening is the achievement gap. We are widening the achievement gap because of this.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. And we're going to talk about that also. And it's very sad that, as you said, here we are in 2021. My son lives in the Raleigh-Durham area. And he was saying, Mom, we only pay like $30, $40 for internet, and we have cable, and we have this, and we can do this. And I'm like, okay. But here I am paying all of this money. Like I said, I finally got the fixed wireless service. It's like $50. And I was like, ooh, jumping for joy. I got it down to 50 from like 150. But you think about parents that can't afford that. When you're debating on whether you're going to pay $50 or you're going to buy grocery that week, what's more important? Okay, next slide, please. These are the struggles of our parents and our students. Many of our parents are essential workers. And because they're essential workers, they have to go to work. Some of them have no choice but to work due to finances. And you're talking about children now that are not in school. So what are you having to pay for? You have to pay daycare. Or you're leaving these children home by themselves. And I'll tell you, that's what's happening in our community. And I think that's happening not only in our community, but a lot of communities, because they just cannot afford this additional daycare. My daughter has 2 children. My grandson will be 2 in February, and my granddaughter just turned 9 in December. And so she was paying for one day. She had one daycare bill for my grandson. And now she has 2. She has 2 right now. She doesn't have 2 because they have COVID. So they're all at home. Yeah, they're working through this stuff. But anyway, you're talking about a daycare bill that went from about $600 to over $1,000. How is that impacting that home? How is that impacting your finances? How is that impacting your grocery bill? How is that impacting just the daily things that you need? I can tell you, it's making a big impact on your life. They don't have the resources to provide educational support for their children. This is one example that just stood out to me so vividly. This parent called me, and the reason she called is she received a call from her child's school. This is a single mom with 5 children. She said to me on the phone, she said, I need some help. I have no choice but to work. If I don't work, my children are not going to eat, and we're not going to have a place to stay. I have to work. So my older children are working with the smaller children to try to get their work done. But what's happening with the older children? They're falling behind on their work. So that's who she had received a phone call about, her oldest child who was not submitting work. Well, this child has become a daycare provider for the younger children. And she says, I don't know what to do. And the teacher just keeps giving all this work. So I asked her to let me speak to the principal, and I did. And I shared the information with the principal, but not only with the principal, but with our district leaders to say, listen, folks, we're going to have a little bit of compassion. This is what's happening in our communities. We're going to have to back off on some of this work. Well, the principal went into the teacher's virtual platform, and he could not believe how much work that the teacher was assigning. And sometimes I think teachers are assigning all this extra work because they think that the kids are not doing anything. But we shouldn't be assigning work just for the sake of giving a child work. Quality is better than quantity. And then for us, we have a bunch of our high school students that have gone to work to help their family. They're no longer, families have lost their jobs. Mom and dad have lost their jobs. So what's happening? These children have gone to work at fast food places. They've gone to work at some of these department stores. We have a bunch in our area that are working in construction. Now, for a high school senior, you go from making $10, $15 a week cutting the grass around your house, and now you're working in construction making $400 a week. We know that that's not a lot of money when it comes to taking care of a family in the long run. But in that child's mind, that senior's mind, $400 is a lot of money. So am I going to give up $400 and stick home and try to do my work? And so we're trying to call these kids and say, listen, you're so close to graduating. Don't give up now. And they're like, I'm making $400 and I'm trying to help my family. So it's really right now, school is really being put, as one of my colleagues said a while back, it's being put on the back burner. It's not even at the forefront of anyone's mind now. Also, we had students that were provided packets to work from home. Those students whose parents said, we don't have internet access, we're not able to online, they were provided packets. The issues with those packets was this. The packets were going home to the children. The pandemic hit, nobody was really aware how this stuff was being spread. So when the packets came back to the school, teachers were putting those packets to the side and not even touching them. So this child that had this packet of work that needed to be done was getting zeros because the packets hadn't been touched. Because, and I'm not blaming teachers, because teachers were terrified that if they touch these packets, they might get COVID, take it home to their families. How is this impacting them? And then we were still marking, if students were logging in on their online platforms, we were marking them present. Or if they sent a packet, they were being marked present. But if the packets had not been checked, the packet was returned Tuesday. Teacher may not check it for 2 weeks later in hopes that if there was anything on the packet, it was gone now. So that child was marked absent. That child was given a zero. And parents were saying, they're doing their work. Why are you marking them absent? In a recent information that we received, it said that in North Carolina, we are missing approximately 10,000 students due to lack of connectivity. I think that number's higher. And I found this today. According to North Carolina Education News, approximately 19% of students are not attending schools regularly. I put that on there for North Carolina, but I know that's not only isolated for us. I know that's across the nation. I know that this is something that's happened all across our communities. Next slide, please. I want to talk to you a little bit about just a little bit about the COVID and the stats that we have right now. We just received an email or text message, and it was in our newspaper also and on Facebook, you know, that our hospital is overwhelmed. We've heard this, and we're in a rural community. We've heard this in the big cities. We've heard this in other places. But even in our community, they have informed us not to come to the hospital. There aren't any beds available. Just this week, just yesterday, I was informed of another friend of mine that passed away from COVID, younger than I am. This is hitting our Native people and our people of color, I mean, really, really hard. Yes, the vaccine's being rolled out and people are going out to get the vaccine, but all of us know that it's not being rolled out as fast as it needs to be. And I'm not blaming anyone for that. There's so much that we're trying to put in place, and I'm just hoping that that's going to change. Am I going to take the vaccine? I'm ready for them to give it to me now, as soon as it's ready. But you're looking at these COVID stats, and I put this on here because our parents are seeing this. They're talking about this in their homes. Who's listening? Our children. Our children hearing this. And that's invoking some form of fear. Absolutely, it is. Absolutely. Next slide, please. According to a recent Time magazine article, students in the United States are likely to have suffered up to 9 months of learning loss in math. And for students of color, that's 12 months. That is huge. You're talking about an entire year of learning loss. Students of color have suffered more learning loss than their white counterparts. While white students entered the school year with 1 to 3 months of learning loss in math, students of color lost 3 to 5 months. Now, I want to put this in perspective. I shared this with some folks in our region here in North Carolina. And I want to talk about learning loss and really how it has impacted us. And I know this is, and I want you to think, when I share this, I want you to think of the things that are happening in your communities. In October of 2016, Hurricane Matthew hit our community. I have never in my life seen so much water. My house, my husband's has a heating and cooling business. And when we built our home, he said, we're going to build this house high off the ground, because if we have to work on it, I'm not going to be crawling on my knees. Well, there was so much water surrounding our house that it was at the very top of our step. Our house is built 4 and a half off the ground. That's high. And the water was up to my step, up to my top step, up to my porch. It looked as if my house was floating on water. That happened in October of 2016. Our schools were out for months because the schools were damaged. The schools were flooded. People's homes were flooded. They had to go in with boats and get people out of their houses. And they were staying in these shelters at the schools once we got the water out of the schools. There was nowhere for them to be. So you're talking about students that have been out of school for months. Okay, we get back in school, everything's running okay. August of 2018, Hurricane Florence hits. The exact same thing. We had no running water. There was water surrounding everything. Once again, we are out of school for months. And now, March of 2020, we're out again. I want you to think about a child that would have started kindergarten this year. How much trauma that child has been exposed to, just in our community. Now I want you to think about what's happening in your communities, and then connect that to the educational loss that we're feeling. That's huge, folks. I don't know about you, but that really is huge when we talk about educational loss of our students. Next slide, please. Anyone have any questions or comments here before I continue? This is a piece that's so important to me, and this is student-teacher relationships. And I'm going to drive this home because this is the core of everything. Relationships are vital. If they, according to research, is the most overlooked educational best practice. We're always looking for that great fix in education that's going to fix everything. With the relationship, why not start building relationships? Relationships are important to all students, but they are vital for students of color. Even for each of us sitting on this platform, we are educated individuals. We still thrive on relationships. We want to have relationships. We've had students that have failed courses, not because of their intellect, not because they couldn't, they're struggling in math, or they're struggling in biology, or they're struggling in reading, whatever the subject may be, but they have failed courses because of the relationship. I remember when I was in the classroom for 17 years, never thought I would leave the classroom. My greatest joy was going to the classroom, loved it. And when PLCs came about and we would all get together and discuss what was happening with the students. And I've had teachers that would come to me and say, what about so-and-so? How is he in your class? Oh, he's fine, he's passing. Well, he's failing me. And I'd call the student out and say, why are you failing? Well, she doesn't like me, so I don't care. Relationships are vital. One story that stands out to me so important is I had this boy, a young man in my class, and was in my geometry class, and we were working on proofs, and he came in and he wasn't writing his notes, which was odd for him. Highly intelligent young man. And I said, why aren't you writing your notes? And he said, I can't, my hand's hurt. And I walked over and looked at his hand, and his hand was blue. And I said, why is your hand blue? He said, I got in a fight. So of course, everybody in the class was like, who are you fighting with, man? Blah, blah, blah. He said, finally he spoke up and he said, my daddy. And the kids were like, what? I would never fight my dad, blah, 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 blah. He finally says, I bet your dad doesn't beat your mom. Everybody in that class fell silent. I got this child, I got someone in the counseling department and got him to take him to the hospital. This child's hand had been broken since Friday. And every time I see this child, as a man now, he's an adult now with children of his own, he reminds me of me taking care of him and his hand. They may not remember the Pythagorean theorem that I taught them, but they will remember the relationship that I have with them. This is a quote that I have really put forth at the forefront of everything I do. And when I started teaching, they assigned me a mentor teacher, and this mentor teacher said this to me, and I've never forgotten it. If you get their heart, their head is easy. And what she meant by that is don't worry about your test scores. If you form those relationships with those children and you develop that relationship with them, they will do whatever they can to please you. And all the years I was in the classroom, I always had standardized tests. Every course didn't have a standardized test, but some of them did. And those that were in math, I always had them. And my principal would always give them to me. And I was like, I just want to teach calculus this semester. And he would say, but you get the test scores. And it wasn't that I was that great, that my intellect was so far greater than anybody else. It was that I formed relationships. And I formed those relationships with those students because I connected to them. And the reason I could connect to them so well is because I had lived their life. My mom's first husband was very abusive, and we lived that life. And I knew that when a child came to the classroom with this behavior issue, there was something greater than what I saw. There was a root that I needed to get to, and I needed to find out what that root was. And when I found out what that root was, then we could move from there. So student-teacher relationships are so vital. And I know we're talking about COVID, but the relationship piece is so important here, because if you don't form a relationship with them, they're not going to reach out and talk to you. They're not going to tell you what's going on. Next slide, please. Anybody want to jump in? Go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to say again, I agree with everything you're saying. Teachers' roles are so important. They can make or break a child, literally. And I have seen teachers break a child. And once they've broken that child, it's very hard to get that child back on the right road. So I totally agree with you. I have my own personal story about that. So I thank you for that. That is right on. If teachers just knew that if a child, you have to have that trust. That child needs to know that you love and care for them before they'll perform for you, especially the ones that have had a history of not being able to rely on good adults to treat them right, because they're coming in expecting you to be the same as the others that they've had to deal with in their life. So thank you for that, Connie. Very good.
And the research says that it takes 3 to 5 years to undo what one ineffective teacher has done to a child. 3 to 5 years. Takes 1 year to change that. When an ineffective teacher comes in and impacts that child in a negative way, it takes 3 to 5 years to change what 1 year has done.
If they have a good teacher to do it.
If they have a good teacher, right. And then if they get another teacher that has that same negative
mentality,
it's difficult.
Yeah.
So look at our social emotional challenges that we have. Native people, we thrive on relationships and connections. We do. We love spending time with our family. How many of you get together on Sunday dinners? You get together for birthdays, celebrations. You have playtime with your children. We go to our powwows and our travel events. These are things that we really thrive on. They've been such a part of who we are. And what has happened now? We don't have them. We don't have them. We don't have that opportunity to get together with our families anymore. We don't have that opportunity to just get around the dinner table on Sunday afternoon and just talk about what's happened during the week. We don't have that time of birthdays and celebrations because of this COVID. Some of our students come from homes, as Teresa just mentioned, where they do not have that connection to family, and they're relying on their teacher to be the one that they can connect to. Because of that, because of this whole pandemic, we have a lack of structure and routine. We've been getting up at 6:30 in the morning, drinking our coffee, going to work, being in the office by 8 o'clock. Now the pandemic's hit. We get up, we're still sitting in our pajamas. The only time we fix our hair and get ready is if we have to be on a virtual meeting where we have to show ourselves, right? So our whole routine has changed. Our students miss their teachers and their friends. And these are three voices I want to share with you that came from students. In our parent committee, with our Indian Education Program, our Parent Advisory Committee, I have 6 students that serve on that Parent Advisory Committee because we want the voice of our students. And in our last meeting, one of our students spoke up and she said, Dr. Connie, may I say something? I said, absolutely. And she said, we're not okay. We're not okay. She said, I'm struggling. I'm really not okay. I miss my friends. I miss my time together. I thought I'd never say that I wanted to be back in school, but I'm just not okay. I'm a senior. I'm trying to prepare for college. I feel like I don't have the connection to my counselor, to my youth development specialists, which are the people that work in our program. I don't have a connection to them. I'm feeling lost. And when she spoke up, the other 5 spoke up with the same concerns. Now I want to tell you this. This young lady that I'm speaking of, her father is an attorney. Her mother is an educator. She comes from a family who calls all the time and says, is there something else we could do? What does she need to do? They are heavily involved in her education. They are very supportive. If she is feeling this way, what about that child that doesn't have that support at home? Then the voice of a middle school student talking to this child. I talked to him because his mom reached out to me and wanted me to talk to him. She's a single parent. She works during the day. He's at home during the day doing his work. He spends all of his time now in his room. When he spends enough of time to get his work done, and then he's gaming, and then he's all by himself. So we had this conversation. He just says, I just don't have anybody to talk to. I'm all by myself. I just stay in my room. He is depressed. He feels alone. He feels isolated. He feels that there's nothing for him to do. So we've talked about some things, and I'm gonna go into that later. The elementary school student. Now this one really hits home for me because this is my granddaughter. My granddaughter said yesterday, and I was talking to my daughter, I was going to tell a different story, but my daughter told me this story yesterday. So this one fits, she says, I'm just tired of this, mommy. I just need to see my teacher. I just need to see her face to face. And she breaks down and she starts to cry. I'm tired of this. She says, I want to look at her in person, and she feels overwhelmed. She says she's telling us to take notes, and we're trying to take notes, and then she's moving her screen to something else, and I can't get the notes, and I can't write them fast enough. And I'm just tired. I just want to go back to school, mommy. Please, just let's go back to school. So her mother now has calling me talking about, should I look at maybe a private school where they're still in school? But then there's also the risk of COVID. How are we going to support these concerns of our students? Next slide, please. These are some of the social emotional effects. We've talked about this: depression, this anxiety. My granddaughter is feeling anxiety. She is 9. I'm telling you what, this really cuts me to my heart, because she should not be feeling this level of anxiety at 9. And she has those supportive parents. And her mother has had a conversation with her teacher, and we're doing everything we can to support her. Her mother's an educator too. And honestly, Kristen said yesterday to me, that's my daughter's name. She said yesterday to Mom, she said, Mama, the only good thing that's come out of us being isolated due to COVID is the fact that we're spending quality time together. She said, I'm having some conversations with Izzy, and my daughter's a school counselor, and she's a mental health professional counselor. So she's aware of all of this stuff, and here she is dealing with this with her child. This is not just happening with this. This is happening all over, is what I'm trying to say. Social isolation. Our kids are just sitting at home by themselves. And what's happening because of their anxiety and their depression and this social isolation, and not just for them, but with all of us. We're overeating. I'm having to watch myself. You know, you don't need to be eating any more of that, even though you're sitting home. We're overeating. Our sleep patterns, we've talked about this already. Our sleep patterns have been disruptive. Instead of getting up at our usual time, and going to bed at our usual time. Maybe our time has been from 6:30 to 10. We'd get up at 6:30, go to bed at 10. Now we're going to bed at 1 and 2 and 3 o'clock in the morning, sleeping to 4 and 5. I called a student just this week. A teacher called about a child that was not logging on, and I called this child, and when I called her, it was 4:15, and I purposely waited till late because she should have been in class that day. And I FaceTimed her because this child is a child that I know personally, and I have a connection with her. And she wouldn't answer. So she called me back. I said, "Why come you wouldn't answer FaceTime?" She said, "I'm in the bed." I said, "Sweetie, it's 4:15. What are you doing in the bed?" So she said, "I was so tired from schoolwork today." And I said, "Well, I just talked to your teacher, and she says you're not on work." "I know, I'm trying to get back." So our sleep patterns have just changed. We're not exercising, we're not getting out, we're not doing anything. This cognitive disruption, our children, especially our elementary children, they're not designed to sit on the computer in front of a computer all day. They're designed to have playtime. That's why in North Carolina, in our statute, in our laws, we are required to have recess time. And that's across the nation. You give these kids this time to run, to play. We have this increased use of technology. So there's a lack of playtime and the lack of discovery. For Christmas this year, I bought my granddaughter robots and Legos because I want her to play. I want her to discover. I want her to use those reasoning skills that she's not using all day just from sitting in front of a computer. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with technology. It's great, and we are in a technological world, but we have to do something besides looking at that computer all day. And because of all of this, it has brought a lot of fear. I'm going to talk about me when we talk about this fear. I told you earlier at the beginning that I've been battling. I'm over it now. I'm much better, much better. But since I was tested positive, my husband and I, on December 28th for COVID. And there was a level of fear that came along with that. And because of that, that made my level of trauma go skyrocket. So all of this is just adding to our trauma. And our students are listening to, they're watching their parents. They're seeing their grandparents die from COVID. And they really don't know how to deal with this. They really don't know how to deal with this. And what level of trauma they have has just been elevated to a different level. I'm going to stop there a minute. Does anyone have any comments? If not, we'll move to the next slide. So I just threw this in here because I just think it's so important. I always talk about culturally responsive instruction. And it's a philosophy that focuses on what that child brings to the classroom culturally. And I love the last one because it's always the forefront of everything I say. It's built on the foundation of relationships and respect. Go to the next slide. Culturally responsive strategies, and how can we utilize them? Culture tells our stories. We have the opportunity to tell our children stories now of the past. We have been through some tough times as Indigenous people, and we have overcome. Tell our stories. Let's remember our past. Remember the things that we've come through. Honor our ancestors, those that have paved the way for us. And let's prepare this next generation for the future. And also use our culture to heal our wounds. Culture tells our stories, remembers our past, honors our ancestors, prepares our future, heals our wounds. Next slide, please. So, as we use the culture to address these social emotional challenges, what can we do? What are some things that we can do? Well, I've already talked about this. We can keep a routine. We need to stick to some form of routine. As I said, if we don't, we end up sleeping all day, then we're up all night, and that triggers a lot of different things in our bodies. Let's look at healthy habits. Let's look at changing the way we're eating. Let's look at exercise, positive thinking. Right now, I like when at the beginning when Teresa said, let's put something in there, what we're hopeful for 2021. And I'm trying really hard to think positive because 2020 has been very difficult in so many ways. And now when we turn on the news, we just hear so much more negativity. The riot last week just added to our uh, social emotional challenges and our concerns. It's just like one thing after another. But we're going to have to start changing our mindset. I don't know if you're familiar with this mindset theory, but Carol DeWitt has a mindset theory, and what she talks about is this fixed mindset over this growth mindset. And so, with that fixed mindset, it's like saying when children come into the classroom, oh, I know you already have this mindset that these kids are not going to do well. She says, forget about that fixed mindset. Focus on a growth mindset. When I look at these kids, I know that they're going to be successful. I believe it. And it goes back to that relationship piece. I believe it. And you know, I would have kids. I had a student come to my class one time and he said, he was a senior and he was a football player and he was a great football player. And he wanted to go to college to play football. Well, here he is a senior and he had to take these 2 math classes. And he said, Miss Connie, let me tell you why everybody calls us by first name in this area, because there's so many Locklears. So on my hall, there were like 5 or 6 Locklears. So all our kids called us Miss Connie. He said, Miss Connie, he said, I have never passed a EOC, which is end of course test. It's a standardized test. He said, I've never passed a test. He said, and I'm probably not going to pass this one, and I probably won't get to go to college. I said, boy, we're going to make up. And I said it piquingly, in a piquing manner. I tapped him on his arm and I said, boy, I'm going to make a liar out of you. And he just looked at me. I said, I am. I'm going to prove to you that you can do math. I'm going to show it to you. I'm going to change this. So I had to change my mindset in order to change his. Because he already had the mindset that he was not going to pass anything, that he wasn't going to accomplish anything. Well, let me tell you, he did. That was the same year that I found I'm getting too deep into this information. Anyway, same year I found a lump in my breast and I was out having surgery. And his mother calls and I'm at home with this tube, this drainage tube, and the phone keeps ringing and I'm like, Mama, just answer it. Mama, like, I'm not going to let him talk to you. You're homesick from work. Well, I finally take the call. I said, please just let me talk to him. And it was this mother crying on the end saying that her son had passed the EOC. And I wasn't even there that day that they took the EOC because I worked up to the last day for testing before I would go have my surgery. And somebody else came in and tested for me. But it's that positive thinking that we have to change. And the next one, get outside and enjoy nature. The Creator has blessed us with such a beautiful world. Just get outside and walk. Change your mindset. Get outside and look at how beautiful nature is. Limit the amount of technology that we use. And you know, I'm just not saying gaming and computer, but I'm talking about social media. Oh my gosh, it is just, I'm almost at the point I want to do away with my social media account, but I use it for work. And when I post stuff on there, things that are happening in our programs for our parents. And not only that, but just television. Sometimes just get away from it. Identify those things that you enjoy doing. If you love to sew, if you love to garden, you love beadwork, artwork. And I put talking with our elders. I know we can't get together, but we could get on the phone and just call them, or even some of them understand this virtual format, develop a virtual format where you can just listen to the wisdom that comes from them. Maybe read a book, maybe get out and participate and dance or singing or whatever. I tell you what I enjoy doing. This is strange for a lot of people, but I am I love canning. So in our area, we have something called chow chow. And so it's like a lumpy salsa. And so I make chow chow. I make jams and jellies, and I can peaches and apples. And I just get in the kitchen and it connects me to my grandmother when I was a little girl. She would put an apron on me and we would get in the kitchen and we would just start canning. And actually, we would be outside because we had to be these big pots and you stare. You remember that, Teresa? And it connects me to my grandmother. And that's what I enjoy doing. Make sure that we focus on uninterrupted sleep. Relax, put some activities. If you go to bed, maybe you just want to read a book instead of on your looking at your social media and getting all wired up and all hyped up before you go, and then you can't go to sleep.
Mm-hmm.
Participate in meditation and prayer, or maybe just listen to a podcast or listen to some soft music, or maybe you like listening to the rain as you sleep. The last two are things that are this is for you, but it's also for me. My husband tells me sometimes I love being in control, and I'm like, no, I don't. He's like, yes, you do. But we have to admit that there are some things that we can't control. We just have to. And we have to put our trust in the Creator. And then learn from those things that we've been faced with. I'm going to talk about this pandemic and what I have learned. A couple weeks ago when I was diagnosed, my husband and I, we couldn't even get out of bed for like 2 days. One day we were in the bed to 2 o'clock and we got up to go to the bathroom and we were holding on the side of the wall. We were so weak. I had so many family, friends, colleagues calling, bringing food to my house, sitting it on my porch, bringing just supplies that I needed. I couldn't get out and go anywhere. Even when I was able to have a teleconference meeting with my doctor and she called in my prescription, I couldn't go get it. My niece went and picked it up, brought it to the house. And I would put money in envelopes for these individuals or a check for the stuff. And I'd go out there to pick the supplies up when they left. It was still sitting there. So, what I learned is that even though there's a lot for us to look at and see the negative in, that just reinforced how good human beings really are. It just reminded me that there's good in this world. Even though we're looking at all the stuff that's happening around us, there's some good things that are going on. Next slide, please. So I put this in here because every time I do a workshop with teachers, I want them to know this. This is just something I want them to know and not to ignore. When we dismiss a student's culture, what are we really rejecting? Their family, their ancestors, everything they've been taught, all that they know to be true. We're rejecting that student. And this is just so, we have to embrace every child that walks in our classroom and embrace our American Indian students. I said to a group of teachers here a while back that in some of our, not as much in my community because we have a large American Indian population here, but in some of our urban communities across our states, sometimes our Indian students want to be invisible. Mm-hmm. They don't even want anyone to recognize that they're American Indian. Mm-hmm. Because it's easier to be invisible than to go into this long detail explaining to people that you're still here. And and that's why I say to teachers, you got to embrace the culture. Yes, we're still here. Yes, we are. And it hurts me when our children feel that they want to be invisible. It really hurts. That's just one of those things that really like a dagger into my heart. And I say that because that's one of the real life experiences for me. My parents moved from the community I grew up in, which was an American Indian community, and we border South Carolina. So they moved 20 minutes across the border. And my third grade teacher said, "All white boys raise your hand, all black boys, all white girls, all black girls." Well, I never raised my hand because I'm waiting for her to say Indian girls. Well, I'm gonna make this a short story. That teacher was so mean to me that I completely shut down. And that was a third grade teacher. Well, I had a fourth grade teacher that changed everything for me. In that fourth grade, when I was writing my thesis for why I wanted to be in education in my master's program, I wrote about my fourth grade teacher, Miss Bethea, and what she did for me. She did everything I've talked to you about on this presentation day. She developed a relationship. She made me believe. She was the first person who told me I was smart. She made me think that I could do anything I wanted to do. And when I wrote about her and I started researching her, what I realized about her is she was a special ed teacher. A lot of our children are placed in special ed not because of their intellect, but because of that relationship. But I'm not going to have time to spend there. I know we're running out of time, but if we'll go to the next slide, please.
What did you mean by that?
Go back. By what?
A lot of our children are placed in special education not because of their intellect, but because of their relationship. Meaning because the teacher knew them enough to that
That's
they.
exactly right. Sometimes when our students sometimes fail classes not because of their intellect, because of the relationship. And it goes back to that. Our students sometimes sit in classroom and teachers look at them because they may come, our American Indian students, and they may look different, or even our children of poverty that come and they don't have as much, and we look at them sometimes differently. We need to not look at what the outer stuff that we see. We need to form that relationship with that child and realize that sometimes there's something deeper in here and we're missing it. And not only are we missing out on the fact that this child, excuse me, excuse me. These children are very intelligent. And we're missing that part.
And Connie, while you're coughing, go ahead if you need some water, because I want to add to that. I think what you're saying is extremely important. Not only that, we need to celebrate Native American culture. We need to celebrate that in schools. Being a Native American should be never a child should be ashamed to be American Indian or Alaska Native. And I know that we have, and they have been shamed. We need to meet them where they are. And we need to stop putting our culture beliefs on Native people and realize that we are different and celebrate that difference. And we've done so much through the years and assimilated us so much through the years, we are losing who we are. And we need to get back to the core of where and who we are, which is why for us, community and powwows and ceremonies is a healing thing. It's healing for us because we are going back to that place, to the people that we know that love us, that share the same beliefs as we do. So I think just what you're saying again is extremely important, extremely important.
And someone put in the chat box that this is the same for African American students. And I agree with you 100%. I think that we have to embrace the culture of our students. When we dismiss their culture, we dismiss who they are. When I go to school, when I went to school in the third grade and my teacher told me that I was not American Indian and I had to select being African American or Caucasian, I knew that that was going against everything my parents had taught me, and I was only in the third grade. So here I am. Basically, what it says to me is that you're calling me a liar and my parents a liar. And so
and they're denying who you are.
Right. And denying who I am. Exactly. Exactly.
Someone made a comment that my daughter's music teacher told her she didn't look Native. How many times have we heard that?
We had a situation here in our county where the teacher told the student to go home. Well, it was in the state. It wasn't in our county, in the state. The teacher told the student to go home during American Indian History Month, Native American. Said, go home and pick out your Indian name and bring it back tomorrow. So she told all the students to go home and get an Indian name. And the mom said, go back and tell her your name is such and such. And the child did. And the teacher said, no, well, you're going to get a 0 if you don't give me your Indian name. Well, the parent went out to the school and the teacher in this community. It wasn't in our county because that would not have happened here, not as large as our Indian population. But the teacher and the principal would not change it. So the child stayed home during that time of everybody giving their Indian names. And it was so disrespectful. And so
Did the child have an Indian name?
no, the mama had named the child. I'm gonna just throw this out. The child had been named, like, I'll say Connie Locklear.
Uh-huh.
But the teacher gave him these examples: wild bull,
The teacher gave them examples of what they needed to call them. Oh my gosh.
fox, things like that. And not that there's anything wrong with that if the parent had given him that name, but that's not the teacher's, and that discredits everything about our culture. You're coming in trying to talk about our culture you don't even know anything about. And so it was just disrespectful. And then in one of our meetings, and this was a meeting where the teacher said, not teacher, let me tell you about, this was a conference. And the gentleman said, you know, when I have these workshops, I tell my students to sit Indian style. And I said, and what do you mean by that? And he said, well, you know, crossways. I said, well, why don't you just tell them to sit with your legs crossed instead of Indian style? Mm-hmm. So after we had a conversation, and he was said, you know, I really didn't think that was disrespectful. I said, well, it is. It's culturally insensitive. Mm-hmm. And we need to be careful and of the things that we say and how it impacts our children. Okay, next slide, please. So how can we connect with our students? And I'm going to have to speed up. Okay, we can have virtual meetings. These are the things that we're doing in our area. We can have virtual meetings with our students with Zoom, Google Meet, whatever platform you have. Develop a meeting. And in that meeting, and what we're doing in some of these meetings, we're not even focusing at first about academics. We're talking about how are you doing? How are you? Just an opportunity to connect. And it's amazing when we have these virtual meetings, some of our youth development specialists, when they have these meetings with their students, and the students get on there like, oh, I miss seeing you, Mr. Mark. I miss seeing you, Miss So-and-so. I miss seeing you. And develop some support groups. But everything that we need to do, we need to focus, I say this over and over and over and over, focus on building relationships. We also provide academic support. We may have a teacher that, like I've already told you, a teacher called and said, this child's not logging on, Can you reach out to that child? Reach out to the child. We may make a phone call to the child. We use Remind app a lot. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but we use that. And sometimes we have gone as far as gone out to homes and done home visits. We've gone to some of these homes, and we've been the ones that have been picking up these students' packets. We've been the ones that have been delivering the hotspots. We've been the ones that have been delivering their packets and picking them up and talking with the parents about why the child hasn't been on. We had one child who had not been logging on. The mom said, I know he's logging on. Well, he was telling the mom he didn't have to be online till 10 when he had to be online at 8. So he was missing 2 class periods so he could sleep late. And so that was an opportunity for us to share that information with the parent. But what's important is making our parents and our students aware that they are not alone. We're here for you. I created a video for our parents, and I try to put a lot of things out there, and I created this video, and I talked about our program. And in that program, I put a picture of everybody that works in our program, every YDS, Youth Development Specialist at that particular school, what schools they're at, so the parents could have a face with a name. And I talked about our program, and at the end of that, I said, you know, we are here for you. This is my phone number. If you feel like you're struggling, if your child needs additional help, you call me at this number. And that video has been shared so many times, and I've had so many phone calls of parents just calling saying, thank you, thank you, thank you. So those are just some ways that we can connect. Next slide, please. We are providing cultural opportunities virtually. We have our culture academies, and we usually have them at our location face-to-face, but because of the pandemic, we're still providing them. We're providing drum and dance, pottery, jewelry making, and we give the kids have their Chromebooks, and they have their hotspots. So they log on with us in the afternoon, and it starts around 5:30. 6 o'clock, and they go from that time to 7, and then they work with their teachers. We hire teachers to come in or individuals, and they come in and they teach these classes for us. We didn't have, I'll be honest with you, we did not have as many with this virtual platform as we had face to face, because some of our kids are like, we've been on it all day, we don't want to do it. At first, this past year we had it, the kids loved it. They enjoyed it. It was wonderful. We are offering STEM initiatives through partnerships with our Lumbee Tribe, our STEM workshop, forensic science camp for Indigenous girls, grades 6 through 8, and our North Carolina Native American Youth Organization. All of these are virtual platforms that we're using for these activities. So we're still able to connect. Next slide, please. I do want to share this with you. I know that our grant allows us to employ additional individuals. As I said, there are 34 that work in our program. Have smaller grants. What are some ways you can reach out? I would say reach out to your elders. You know, we still reach out to our elders. They are so excited about sharing, and they want to be the ones to give advice and talk to these young people. They love it. Reach out to them. Seek additional help from others. Reach out to your tribal leaders and say, hey, would you be willing to talk to this group of students? You know, we just need somebody to reach out to them. And neighbors, I say this, check on your neighbors. Reaching out to others won't only impact them, but it's going to impact you.
And I have to add too with that, Connie, just think about our elders too in this pandemic. You know, it's, and I'm going to use my mother an example. She doesn't go anywhere unless it's a doctor's appointment. I don't want her to because I'm scared that she's going to get COVID, you know, and I know what happens if she does. So they are very lonely. They're in a vulnerable position right now, and they are extremely lonely. My mother used to go to the elderly. They had a program there for elders that she used to go to before this pandemic starts. Now she's not going anywhere. So she sits there day in and day out by herself watching TV. So it's very important that we are going and checking on our elderly population today.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Thank you. Next slide, please. Okay, that concludes this PowerPoint, this presentation. I really hope that you have enjoyed. I want to open the time now and entertain any questions or comments that you have at this point. I do want to thank you for allowing me to share. I'm really passionate about our American Indian students, because when I shared this with the state board a while back, when I see our American Indian students, I see, and the things that they're going through, it's just not looking at them, it's looking at a mirror. It's looking in a mirror, it's looking at me. Because I was that child of poverty. I was that child that grew up in a community where there were only a few American Indians, and I was just told I had to select other. The only club I could be in was Beta Club and Office Assistant, because every club was racially divided. There was a club for African American males, African American females, Caucasian males, Caucasian females. There wasn't anything for me. And so the day that I took over as Indian Education Director, and even before that as a teacher, it's always been my goal to help every child that I came in contact with, but especially our American Indian students. So I'll stop there and entertain any questions at this point.
Or comments. While people are thinking and waiting, I will say this was awesome, Connie, and I appreciate this. Everything you had to say was right on. We are very, you know, we just, I feel for my people too, and I can tell that you're very passionate for it as well. You have that spirit for your people and for us to do better as a whole. And I feel that, and I do want our better for our people. I truly do. And you know, this pandemic has just taught so many lessons. I do hope that, if nothing else, that we get out of this pandemic, that it's going to be the fact that every household in America should have high-speed internet. That's number one. There's just no excuse for that to me. There's just not an excuse. And then, the achievement gap. And just like you said, you can't give person A and person B the same level of education, because person A and person B is not on the same level. They're not starting on the same level. And those are just so, so, so important. So I think you did a great presentation today. So
Thank you.
Everybody's saying thank you.
Thank you, everyone. It has been my pleasure, and I'm sorry for the coffee spill. I thought I was going to make it through without coffee, but anyway, it has been my pleasure to share, and it is my daughter told me several years ago. She said, "Mama," she said, "teaching has always been different for you than everybody else." And I said, "Why?" She said, "It's your passion." And I said, "What are you trying to say? I didn't treat you different, did I? Did I not?" She said, "No, no, it's not that. It's just that you really get passionate about." And I do. I really love children that I come in contact with, and it's hard not to see myself when I see them, because as a young child, I experienced a lot of the trauma that they experience. Some of them experience now. As a young child, I grew up very poor. There would be times when my mama would not eat until she made sure all of us ate. There were times when we didn't know if we were going to get anything for Christmas. It was a very tough time. But
Yep.
out of all of those things, I've made it. I'm truly blessed.
You're blessed. Yeah.
Both of my children have graduated from college. My daughter has just completed her master's program. My son's entering the master's program this year. My husband will graduate again in a couple of months. He graduates in May. And my family, because of the opportunities have been, my sister and my brother have gone to college. So I've paved the way for my whole family, and I'm really grateful for that. But I'm grateful for those people like Miss Bethay, who paved the way for me as a fourth grade teacher so that I could pave the way for others.
And I'll tell you a little story about myself, and I'm not going to tell you the whole story. But I have a similar background, and I had a terrible situation that happened to me. And it was racial when I was in high school. And I'll just tell you, long story short, we have a few minutes. My parents grew up Cumberland County, Lumberton, Clinton. We were with poor, just like everybody else. We were with Native people, just like everybody else. So I was in my comfort zone. My parents got divorced. I went to Raleigh, very prominent white area, rich area. Me and my mom lived in someone's basement. I loved basketball, and basketball was my savings grace. I fast forward just a little bit. I'll just tell you that the basketball coach said to my face, he did not want my kind on his team. And it destroyed me. And I ended up quitting school, went to alcohol, being no good. And it was my sister several years later who changed my life, because I was sad, obviously. And she said, "Teresa, if there was anything that you could do in this world, what would it do? What would you do?" And before I even think about it, I said, to go to college. And she said, "Well, then go to college." And I said, "Right," thinking I didn't have the material or the brains to go to college. And she said, "Do it, apply." I applied to UNC Pembroke, moved in with my sister and Evan, and that was my new journey. But it took one person to destroy me, and it took one person to make me who I am today. So there's my passion, and there's where it comes from. And I vowed when I was a school principal that no child would be treated like that on my watch. So we have to honor and respect our Native children.
Exactly.
So does anybody else have any comments, anything else they want to say? We normally run out of time. So now that we have an hour and a half, we've got a few more minutes. Holly said it was a very good training. It was so close to my grandson's life in schools, and he has never healed from the bad treatment that he received from the teachers, even on the reservation. And yes, that's an issue. I worked at a Native American school, tribally controlled schools. And the thing of it is unfortunately, most of the people there, and forgive me for saying this, but they're non-native and they're also young, and they go to there, a lot of them, to get their experience and then move on. So there's a lot of turnover. So to your point of saying that you have to make sure that you get the right teachers, number one, and then teachers need to know this cultural aspect of Native Americans. They need to know we are different people and we need to be taught differently and treated differently and reached out to differently. Otherwise, it's just not going to work. It's just not going to work. And I've always pushed, and I will continue to push for more Native American teachers, principals, and other administrators to be employed in Native American schools, because that's what we need to change things. Connie, you want to leave us with some words of wisdom real quick before we sign off here?
The greatest words of wisdom that came to me, I'm going to say it again, it's in the PowerPoint. If you get their heart, their head is easy.
Yep.
That is so powerful. I've been in education. I'm on my 27th, 28th year. And that was told to me as a beginning teacher. And I just can't, I've never been able to sway from that. I have been, in the 17 years I was in the classroom, I've probably written 3 or 4 kids to go to the office. I never had write-ups.
You didn't have to.
There was a bigger problem. I looked for the root of the problem and not just the surface.
Mm-hmm.
I would encourage all of us to look for the root of the problem and not just the surface.
Yep.
And I will say this, I don't care who you are, I don't care where you come from, every one of us have some form of trauma.
Absolutely.
Every one of us have something going on. And the best thing we can do for each other is to help each other through these difficult times that we're in, instead of being like the crowd pulling each other down. So I just want to encourage everyone. I know this work is hard. I'll tell you, education is a work of heart. It is not easy. It is not easy. I don't care what anybody says. It's hard work, but it's the most worthwhile work I've ever done. And I've had many opportunities to leave this profession that I'm in because my math degree, and I could have made thousands of more dollars,
Mm-hmm.
but that wasn't where my heart was. And if you're not in it for your heart, you're not going to be as successful and as happy. So I'm just happy with what I'm doing. I'm happy that I had the opportunity to talk to all of you today. I'm excited about that. I just encourage everyone to help make the path wider and better for the next generation that comes along.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Connie. I appreciate that so much. Guys, I think Ella put GIPRA is just like a survey or about the seminar you just watched. If you guys could just take a few minutes to fill that out. Again, our next session is going to be January 29th, which is on a Friday, again at 2 o'clock p.m. Central to 3:30. Dr. Connie, thank you very much. Appreciated. Thank you so much.
Have a great one.
Okay.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you, guys. Have a great day.